Hey, this is Dan from Tiny Home Builders. In this video, I'm going to be making a simple modification to one of our tiny house plans. Now you might be wondering, why would you want to modify the plans? And the reason is that when you're looking for a tiny house design, you've got a couple different options out there. On one end, you've got something that's, if you come up with something completely unique, you're going to have to design that from scratch, right? So you've got some idea that no one has ever come up with, then you're starting from scratch. And unfortunately, that's going to be the most expensive option out there because it just takes a lot of time. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got, if you can find a set of plans that already exist that give you exactly what you want, then that's fantastic. You don't have to do any modifications. You don't have to spend any time customizing them. And so that is going to be your least expensive option. Now, unfortunately, most people kind of fall in the middle there. So they can't find exactly what they want, but they see a couple designs out there that get them pretty close to what they're looking for. And that is where you'd want to modify them, okay? You'd want to acquire those plans, buy those plans, and then modify them to move the windows around, change the window sizes to give you exactly what you want. In order to modify the plans though, they have to come in a format that's a file format that's editable, meaning it has to be either SketchUp or Autodesk or AutoCAD. If you're buying plans that are in a PDF format, PDFs can't be edited. It's essentially digital paper. It's just like as if you printed it out. You can't go and start moving windows around on a piece of paper, and you can't do that on a PDF either. So if you want to modify the plans, make sure that you're getting plans that either include SketchUp or include AutoCAD. One thing to be aware of though is that if you're looking at AutoCAD and SketchUp files, AutoCAD, while that's used by professionals, there is no home version for you to use. So it's not very easy as a hobbyist or someone who's playing around with it to modify those files. You can use those files to hand off to a draftsperson or a professional architect, and they at least have a starting point. So if that's the route that you're going to take, AutoCAD is perfectly fine. But if you're planning on doing it yourself, then really you want to focus on SketchUp. SketchUp has a free version, and then even if you decide to buy into SketchUp, the cost of SketchUp is relatively low. The modification that I'm going to make today is probably the most common modification that we are requested of, which is simply to move a window. You know, normally when someone buys a set of plans, they're happy with the size, they're happy with the look of the house, but when you start rearranging the interior components of the house, like moving the sink or moving the couch around, a lot of times that will result in having to move a window. And a great example of this is you almost always want a window above your sink, and that window above a sink is a special window in that it's shorter than some of the other windows because it has to be up higher so that it doesn't interfere with the countertop. Whereas a window behind a couch, that can be quite a bit lower. So when you look at a tiny house design or tiny house set of plans, you'll typically see a smaller window that's above the sink. So if you start moving the inside parts around and to better match what you want in your house, let's say you want a bigger kitchen or some other change that requires moving things around, more than likely that's going to impact the design of the house by having an impact on the window placement. So, it's relatively easy to change a window. You can change the window size, you can move a window, and that's what we're going to do. So let's get started. So I've opened up here our Tiny Element 24 set of plans. And like I said, first off, I'm going to grab this rotate tool just so I can rotate around and take a look at it. Now, one thing, as I've done in the other videos, is I've changed out the tool set here. So if you go up into View, Toolbars, I uncheck Getting Started, and I check the large tool set just in case you're just starting out. And one thing you want to notice here is that across the top here, as well as over here, we've got a list of all these scenes, okay? And what a scene is it's just setting the camera angle, and there's a couple different things it's setting, but the main thing is it's setting the camera angle that you're viewing, and then it also sets the layers that are on. I think now it's called tags. So it's setting the tags that are on. And basically, if you don't know what those are, tags is just a collection of components or collection of objects that's named. And so that's really helpful if I want to, for instance, how we use it is we'll say left wall sheathing. And then we'll put all the sheathing on the left, in that tag, all the pieces of sheathing on the left wall, and then rear sheathing and right sheathing, and then left wall framing, right wall framing, all of our measurements. We group them all in these little tags, and that way we can turn groups on and off visibility wise at a time. So when we're setting a scene, we can say if we're shooting a scene that is only, or showing a scene that's only going to be the sheathing, then we might want to turn off all the other layers so that we can focus on the sheathing. And you'll see that in the plans. That's how it comes out in the plans. So these scenes, they actually do correlate with if you own our plans, they do correlate with the pages of the plans. So the names don't necessarily match. They might actually pretty closely, but they're not. It's not always a one for one. But you can pretty easily figure out what's what. All right, so let's just click on framing right, for instance. So framing right, it sets the angle of the camera such that I'm looking directly at the right wall, and it's turned off all of the other tags, the visibility, it's turned off those visibilities of all the other tags that I'm not interested in. So it's only got the tag for the, what did I say, left wall, right wall, the subfloor sheathing, and then the right measurements, okay? So again, this looks just like a page from our plans. And then if I click on another scene, you know, it turns back on different tags and sets the camera angle as well. So this is a really easy way to navigate through a set of plans when you're working with them. You know, if you wanna do it manually, you can, but you can, you know, go in and set the visibility of each of these. You can hide them, but then you have to unhide all. It just becomes a little bit more difficult to manage. These scenes make it a lot easier. And that's already done all for you if you're using one of our plans. All right, so I'm gonna use the rotate tool. Back over here, we've got, I mentioned earlier that the window above the kitchen sink is usually a little bit smaller. And this is a pretty big window, but you do notice that it doesn't quite go as high because it's underneath the loft here. It doesn't quite go as high as this living room window. And then also it's a little bit higher than the living room window as well, because you want these in the family room or living room, you have a little bit more room, because even if a couch is a little bit in front of a window, it's not a big deal. Couches sit lower than countertops typically. But with a sink, you cannot put the window below the countertop level. That would just be, you know, that'd be a mess. And there is a set of plans out there that I've seen that does have that. It does look a little funny. It just looks like where you'd lose everything. You know, the back of the countertop just drops off. You're gonna lose everything there. Okay, so let's go ahead and so we're gonna move this window. So the modification that we're gonna make is, let's say you're in here and you decided that you're playing around with this. You've got the layout and you've decided, hey, I want to move the sink down this direction. So this whole window has to shift. So let's go ahead and do that. So this is the left wall. So framing left, I'm just gonna look at this. So click on that, click on my scene, my framing left wall, so I can just focus. I'm gonna focus on the framing at first, and then I'm going to move on to the sheeting. All right, so one of the concerns that people have when they start moving things around is, if you move something, are you going to mess with the structural integrity of the wall? And that's a valid concern. So one thing to note when you're looking at this is you'll see here that this stud is, and when I'm saying stud, I'm talking about, this is a stick-built house, so I'm talking about the 2x4s. So if you look at this 2x4 here, and you look at the next one, they are 24 inches apart, or on center as we call them. And so those studs that are in the wall, those 2x4s that are in the wall that are 2 feet on center, if there were no windows, that would be the only studs in the wall. That is what's that's making the house structurally sound. And then what we're doing, everything around these windows, is when we start breaking those studs, then we need to, or inserting windows and cutting through those studs, then we need to add extra framing to support that. And the main thing we're adding, so if you look here, if this is 24 inches, this is one of the normal studs. This is a normal stud, this is a normal stud, but they've been broken, they've been cut to insert this window here. And so one thing that we've done because of that is we've put what's called a header up here. So that's a really bigger piece, not really big, but a bigger piece of wood that is not going to deflect, that's going to allow the weight that you've now cut, that can't get through the framing, can't get into the ground. That's going to provide it a pathway to get around the window opening. And so if you look, this stud here, the header, these two studs, and then this sill plate, these are all pieces that are related to the window itself. If the window wasn't here, this would be continuous, this would be continuous, this would be continuous, this one would be continuous, and then there'd be none of these other pieces. So when we're interested in moving a window, we first want to focus on just moving the pieces that are related to the window. Okay, so I'm going to go through and select those. So I'm going to select the select tool. I'm going to hold my shift key down, and I'm gonna select them. So let's just go through those pieces again. We've got the header, we've got the sill. Oop, now I clicked here and I was trying to click the sill, but it accidentally clicked the measurement. So let's just click this down a little bit lower and let's select the measurement so we deselected. We've got this little stud here, these little studs here that are supporting the header. And then we've got these that frame out the window, okay? So if you notice, this is untouched, this is untouched, this is untouched, this is untouched, and this is untouched, okay? All the ones that are the 24 inch on center, this 24 inches apart, not quite apart, but 24 inches on center studs. All right, so let's move this window. We're gonna move this window down. I wanna make sure that I move it outside of the stud so that you can see what we do in that case. So let's just go ahead and move it down. Let's see. Let me just pick a random amount. Okay, so what do we got? Let's do 24 inches. All right, 24. We moved our window 24 inches. Now this doesn't look right? This one, like what's going on here? If you can frame this, I'm gonna be real impressed. I guess you could just nail it on top and but when I say impressed, I mean really disappointed. All right, so we want to replace this. We want to go ahead and replace these two little pieces with a full one, of continuous one. So before I delete them, I'm going to go ahead and use it so that I don't have to measure again. I'm just going to go ahead and take the full one, Control C, Control V. And I like to copy from here because if I copy from here, then that means it's the same component as this. And so when I start resizing, if I ever have to resize the wall, it's going to resize. So I'd prefer not to create a new one here. So then I can just drop it right where that other one is. And that way, I didn't have to do any measurements or anything. So now I can go back and delete my partial pieces. So I delete this one, I delete that one. Okay, so now we're looking pretty good here. All right, then I got this stud here, the stud for that. For this window is all around it. I got my header. I've got this one. This is my other 24 inch on center. That's important. This one has to be here because that frames out the fender. I got these right. So then the only other thing that's messed up is what's happening right here. I've got a stud that's running through the middle of my window. Obviously that would be, that's gonna really, really hurt my window. Okay, so this piece that's gonna be up here, I can go ahead and I'll remove this, but again, I'm gonna remove it after I put the other pieces in there. So that I don't have to do all my measuring. So I'm going to take this one. This one will be, this one right here that's not there yet will be the same as this one. So I can go ahead and copy and Control C, Control V that. Put that right there. And then I need a piece underneath the window. Now there is unfortunately no pieces that's this size. Okay, we've got these two that are underneath the window, but they don't have the header over the fender. And so I will have to resize one. So let me go ahead and just take one of these for the time being. Control C, Control V. Now, because this is a component, I have to make it unique. If I don't make it unique, if I change the size of this one, it will change the size of the other ones. I've referenced this a couple times in my other videos, but just in case you don't know, a component is a collection of a bunch of individual pieces that are grouped together. Not like a tag. A tag groups multiple components together. I think it can group individual pieces together. But a component is you take, you draw a rectangle, you draw this stud, you turn it into a component, and that way when you manipulate it, you're manipulating it as one object, not the individual lines and not the individual panes. And then when you resize it, it actually impacts all the other components out there that are the same. Really helpful when you're working on a set of plans or when you're working on a house. If you decide to make a change that is pretty far reaching, it makes that much easier. For instance, you want to change the height of a wall. It makes it really easy just to go in there and change one stud and all the studs will change. All right, so I've got my component here selected. I don't know if I already did this before I started talking. No, I did not. So make unique, okay? So that keeps it a component, but it makes a unique component. It's no longer one of these. So then I double click on it. Because it's a component, I can't edit it. If I tried to resize this, and let's say I click on my push-pull tool, if I try to resize this component with it being a component and not being editable at this point, I get the little, you see the little red slash line through my tool. So I can't use it yet. So go back to my select tool. I double click on it, that puts the dotted lines around it, and I'm now in edit mode of that component. And I can go back to my push-pull tool. And what I'm trying to do is I want to grab this pane right here that's not visible and push it down so that it's underneath this sill, okay? So it's not visible, but I know it's there, and the computer program knows it's there. So I can just kind of guess where it's at and then push and pull it. Now for me, sometimes that gets a little bit more complicated when you're guessing. So what sometimes I'll do is, like this one's pretty obvious, it's gonna be directly above that line, the pane for the end of this, but sometimes it's not very obvious if you've got some complicated angles. And so what I'll do is you can see when I hover over this pane, it becomes a dotted, bunch of little dots on it. I'll just move, and as soon as those little dots disappear, I know that I'm no longer on the current pane and I've moved over to the other one, and now I can click and start to push and pull it, okay? So I'm gonna click over here. I guess I could click here too. I click usually where there's an intersection where there's a corner. It's only going in this one direction, so no matter where I go off of off that line, it's still only gonna move in the one direction. I'm only gonna make it longer or shorter. So I just need to click somewhere on the bottom of this sill so that it becomes that height. So I'll just go ahead and click here. I would normally click on the corner because it's easier to click on corners sometimes. The program will snap to corners easier, but I'll go ahead and click here. Okay, dotted line changed because now the component is smaller. Click my selection tool, I'm outside the component. All right, so what it's hard to see right now is I've got this stud, I've got one of those copied right here, and I've got one of these that I resized copied over here, and then I have this extra one that was there because I moved the window over to where it was at. So I can just go ahead and click on this one and delete it, and now you can only see the other two. Okay, that looks pretty good, right? So I've got my studs on 24 inches on center still, and I've got my header. So that's the important thing. You gotta make sure that there is a stud. In our case, we're using advanced framing techniques, so it's 24 inches on center. Sometimes people will talk about 16 inches on center, but both of those 48 inches is evenly divisible by both 24 and 16. So that's why those measurements are important, so that when we put our sheathing on there, our sheathing ends on the seam, our seam ends in the middle of a 2x4, in the middle of a stud. And so we want to make sure that for structural integrity, we have a stud at every 24 inches on center or 16. But then it's also so that we have something to attach our sheathing to. You know, if we don't have studs there, our sheathing is going to get up there and it's going to be flopping in the wind, and you're going to wonder where you went wrong. So, so that's the most important thing. All right, so we moved our window. So now we've got to move our sheathing. So let me go to another, let's see, this was framing left. Let's go to sheathing left. Sheathing left, okay. So now you've got the cutout for the sheathing. All of a sudden now you can see studs. And why is that? Because we moved the window, right? So this sheathing is back where the window used to be. So I turn this around, I'm gonna use my rotate tool. It's called orbit tool. I call it rotate. All right, so you can see the window is over here now. Let's move our window. All right. So looks like this piece of sheathing will become a full sheet of sheathing. I could go ahead and manipulate this piece of sheathing to make it a full one, but I'd rather copy over this component, because if I copy over the component, then I make a change, you know, you get the benefits of the components. So I'm gonna go ahead and ultimately delete this one. Actually, I can just delete it now. And then I'm gonna take this one, Control C, Control V, pop it up here, and then we are good. I can see that this is abandoned because it's no longer attached to anything. I'm gonna have to add these measurements back in. So and if I resize the original one, the measurements would actually move with the resizing. So, but they were never gonna be on this sheet, so I'm gonna have to delete them anyways. So let's just go ahead and click on that and hit delete, click on this and hit delete, and click on this and hit delete. So we will add our measurements back in. All right, so now I've got this piece of sheathing that needs to come out from this edge to cover this up. Unfortunately, there's nothing over here for me to drag. This component, this piece of sheathing or piece of plywood ends right here, so I can't expand it from here. I can't pull using the push-pull tool from over here. There's nothing to push-pull, but I can grab something from down here and pull it up. Now, if I pull it up right now, it's gonna pull the entire thing up. So let's just see what that looks like. I'm gonna double click on this. I get the dotted lines. I'm now editing the component. I'm using the push pull. I wanna push pull just this section, but of course it pushes and pulls the whole thing. It doesn't know, it's not a mind reader. It doesn't know which portion I wanna push pull. So I'm gonna hit escape. That undoes it. It undoes it as long as you haven't committed it, meaning that I've clicked. If I push and pull and then I click and I've committed it, escape doesn't do anything. I have to hit Control Z or undo. You can always go up into edit if you don't remember these. You've got cut, copy, paste, undo, control. That says Alt backspace. I Control Z. All right, it works either way. All right, so we're still in edit mode. We're still editing this component. And so I wanna pull up this section, but not this section. I have to tell SketchUp what I'm trying to do. And so all I gotta do is just put a little line here. Just put a little line to separate the left side from the right side. So I'm gonna grab my little line tool. I'm gonna click in this corner. Even though this corner is not part of the component, it's grayed out. Even though it's not part of the component, it still recognizes when I click on it. So I click here, drag over. I can see the line turn red. That means it's on the axis. Okay, it's on the red axis. That's what I want. And I don't remember that I want the red axis. I just know I want the line to go in this direction, and it turned red. So that means I'm on axis. It's the right one because it's going in the direction that I want. And so I'm gonna go ahead and use it. And then I'm just gonna click here. All right, so now when I use the push-pull tool, if I hover over this, you see how only this pane is getting the dotted lines, not this one. So now when I pull up, I'm gonna click in the corner because I like clicking in corners. I could click over in this corner. I could click anywhere because it's only moving in one direction. It can only move in one direction. So I click there, and now I've got this side covered, okay? But this is only covering half the window. So I've taken care of this half of the piece of sheathing. But while I've got it still in the dotted lines, while I still got it in the edit mode, let's go ahead and expand this side out to make it bigger so that it can, I can reveal more of the window. All right, so I'm just gonna rotate, use my little hand tool to move it around, use the push-pull tool to push it, and now the window actually goes beyond this piece. So I'm going to the end, and that's it. It looks like it might have left a little line here, which can happen. We'll see here in a second. Okay, I think it left a very small strip of the sheathing right here that we will have to come back and delete later. So, all right, now we've got the rest of this. Now one way, so again, I've got to modify this component. Now this one may actually be, I was thinking that it might be used someplace else, but it's the only short one. There's no other short ones that are full pieces, so I don't have to make it unique. So I can go ahead and push this. I can go ahead and modify this. I can put it in edit mode. I can make the little lines. I can then push it, but let's do it a slightly different way just so you can see other ways. If it's a smaller window, I'll use this other technique where I come around to the inside. All right, now this is the camera view right now is set to parallel projection. So that it's set to parallel projection, and what that does is that flattens everything, which is nice for when you're looking at a set of plans. You're not trying to put perspective into a set of plans. You want all the wood to be laid out really flat, and you want it to be flat as far away, as far right and as far up down as it goes, as far as right, left, and as it goes. You don't want perspective in there. Whereas if you were to actually look at the plans, if you were to look at a 3D model, you would start, as it gets farther out, you would see different angles because of perspective. So when in SketchUp, you have the option of, hey, do you want to look at things flat, or do you want to look at things how they really are in the real world? And that is up here in the camera. So parallel projection or perspective. Do you want to have perspective? So what I want to do is I want to draw a box on the back of this piece of sheathing and then push pull that whole box. Instead of taking a little strip and push pulling that, I want to do it with the whole box. It's really hard to add this box right here because I have it set in parallel perspective, because I can't actually make out the difference between the sheathing and these pieces of wood here. So pay attention, special right here, right where the framing and the sheathing, it's hard, let me click away from this. It's hard to tell the difference. You can actually see, you can see a little bit of the edge here, but I can't see any of, I can't make any difference here and make out any difference between this piece of the header and the sheathing. So let's go ahead and go to camera and change it to perspective. Pop me really far back out. So let's zoom back in and then change it. Now you see how I can tell the difference between the wood, the sheathing, and the wood around it? Because there's perspective, I'm seeing more of this edge, but then over here, I'm seeing more of the edge on the other side. That's perspective, right? If I hold my hand up and I move it over here, when I look over there, I can see this side of my hand. When I look over here, I can see this side of my hand. Same thing with this. Okay, so now I can see this piece of sheathing a lot more clearly. And so now it's really easy for me to draw a box on it. So I'm gonna double click on it to put it in edit mode, grab my little rectangle tool, click in the corner, drag down. All right, now there is a box on top of that, which allows me to push-pull just a little bit, just that portion. So let me get the push-pull tool. Now if I pulled it out here, I can make it really big. That's not what I want. I want it to be small. So I want it to disappear. So I know that's a 1/2 inch thick, so I wanted to go back a 1/2 inch. And so I could type in 1/2 inch if I wanted to, but if I look, when that text turns red, that's telling me that, hey, you've hit the limit. If you click now, you're gonna actually delete the object. So delete that area. So click, and then it's gone. All right, you see this line here? This is what I was talking about on that other piece of sheathing. It left this little artifact there for whatever reason. So we just gotta get rid of that. All right, zoom out, click away. Let's come back. Now this is that weird little sliver that I saw it leave behind. Every once in a while it does that. If I'm unsure what this belongs to, if I just click on it, you can see that this whole piece of sheathing gets highlighted in blue, meaning it's part of that. So I'm just gonna click on that, and then I'm gonna highlight from the bottom right up. Now, if I highlight it from the top left down, the only thing that gets selected is if the entire thing is being selected. And that's kind of neat. If you have an object in the middle of a bunch of other objects and you want to delete it, then you can go from the top left to the bottom right, and only the object that you've fully encased or encompassed with your box will get selected. Whereas if you're doing it from the bottom right up, anything that's in that box, regardless if it's entirely in the box or just a portion of it is in the box, gets selected. So I could do that, fully get it in there, but I just like doing this where I can make a smaller box and know that I didn't get anything else. Hit delete, and then you're done. All right, last thing is we've got to go back and add in our dimensions. All right, so when I'm adding something, I want to make sure I'm adding it to the appropriate tag, okay? So I've got this little thing up here that I've turned this on with my toolbars. Let's see if I can find it. I've got tags turned on here as well. So not only did I turn on large tool set, but I turned on my tags as well. That allows me to select an item and then set the tag right here. The other thing I can do is, if you don't want to turn that on, is you can just put the little pencil. It's kind of hard to see here. They made it a little difficult. There's a little tiny pencil here, and that pencil next to a tag tells you, hey, when you add something, that's the tag that it's going to be added to, okay? So what I want to do is I want to make sure that I'm adding, when I add the measurements back in, I'm adding them to the appropriate tag so that when I start switching between my different scenes, it still looks good. If I add them to just the generic untagged tag, which is an actual tag, untagged, when I add them to the untagged tag, they will show up on everywhere. And then you have these miscellaneous measurements just showing up everywhere. So we don't want that. So let's go ahead and I want to put it on this, whatever tag this is on. And so the easy way to figure out what tag this is on is this is visible right now. So if you notice when I look over at the tags, all the tags that are visible have a little eye on them, and they're also not grayed out. So there's a lot of tags here, but I don't have to look through all of these tags to figure it out. I just got to look through the ones that are dark. I can also just click this and look up here. So this is sheathing measurements left exterior wall. That's the tag that's on. So sheathing measurements, what is this one? Sheathing measurements sheathing measurements. Sheathing measurements, left exterior wall. I'm gonna click over here. Again, not super clear, not really obvious, but you click over here and you add the little pencil there, okay? Again, if you add them in without doing this, you could always just select them and then change it manually up here, but we're just gonna start by doing it in the right tag. All right, so now I'm gonna go to my measurement layer. I remember that there was a measurement told me what the height of it was. There was also a measurement that showed where it was from the ground. So I can't click there. There's no way to click there. You have to click in a corner. This is why I like clicking in corners. All right. So that's 4 feet off the bottom. It's 2 feet and 8 3/4 inches. And then I think there was probably a width. I have a bunch of widths here. So go back to the measurement tool. Oh, now, okay. So I clicked here and I noticed that this measurement over here, the dimension I already put there, turned blue. So sometimes when you click on a corner where there's already a dimension, it will accidentally select that corner instead of creating a new one. So it's always wise to start in a corner that doesn't have a measurement already. Sometimes that's not possible, so you just have to be a little bit more careful. So I'm gonna hit the escape button because if I zoom out, you can see that I'm actually accidentally started modifying this one. I don't want that. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit escape because I didn't commit anything. I'm gonna start in this corner this time. I'm gonna click there, and then because this measurement is visible on the screen, why is it not doing that? When it will give me a dotted line when it's at the same height, which just as someone who's a little anal retentive, having all your measurements line up, that kind of makes me a little happy. All right, well that's it. We have finished our plans. Now, if you've bought plans, how we make our plans is through another product that the company that makes SketchUp makes. It's called Layout. You can't, if you don't buy the special version that includes Layout from Trimble, and when we sell our plans, we don't provide our layout files. So there's no way for you to completely regenerate the plans. There's no way for you just to get the exact same plans. But what you can do is if you just click on these tabs, on these scenes right here, and then you can actually export these via a JPEG, and you can stick those into a document, or you can do a screenshot of the different scenes, and you can recreate the plans that way. That's how we originally used to create our plans before we knew about layout way back in 2009. We would do screenshots of all of the different scenes and then compile it into a document, and it looked identical. It looks the exact same. It just is a lot easier to apply changes when you're using a program called Layout, but it by no means is necessary to recreate the plans in a usable format. Okay, so hopefully that helps. I know it's a little bit long video, but hopefully that makes your job a little bit easier when you want to make some simple modifications to a set of tiny house plans. Till next time.